Okay, Shelly, we're going to bring you up on the screen in San Diego momentarily. There you are. Okay. So welcome, Shelly, and welcome everybody here to the gallery at Calit2 Spring Show. It's Performing Code, an exhibition of and series of performances featuring the work of Shelly Knotts, who you see on the screen here. She's live in Melbourne, Australia. She's a musician and audiovisualist based in Melbourne, and she's active in the live coding community. So Shelly's going to tell you a lot more about live coding, but briefly it's the practice of writing code live in front of an audience, usually in the context of creating music or real-time visuals. Investigates performative coding as a means of addressing liveness in computer performance. But a broader concern is making more transparent the processes by which humans create and improvise using algorithms. In her live coding work, or in addition to her live coding work, Shelly's research and practices address improvisation and collaboration in networked music, exploring aspects of code, data, and collaboration in improvisation. Shelly's a popular performer at Algaraves, which are basically nightclub-style events where people dance to music generated by algorithms. Algorithmic dance culture has developed quite a scene over the past 5 or so years, especially in the UK, but really all over the world. And besides performing at numerous Algaraves and live coding events, Shelly's current collaborative projects include the algopop duo Algababes with Joanne Armitage, OFFAL, the Orchestra for Females and Laptops, which actually we all hear tonight, and collaborative live coding performances with Alo Alik. In 2017, she was a winner of the PRS Foundation Orem Award for Innovation in Sound and Music. So as I mentioned, Shelly appears with us tonight from Melbourne, Australia, and she will be here in San Diego in person in June when we'll do another performance event along with a panel discussion focusing on improvisation. So we have 2 performances tonight. The first one will be OFFAL, OFFAL, a collaborative performance, which Shelly will explain. And then she'll do a live coding solo performance. And just so everybody knows how we're doing this technically, using the high-tech technologies of Skype and YouTube. So we're going to use, since YouTube sounds better but has a delay, we're going to be using Skype for discussion when we want to talk back and forth with Shelly, and YouTube for the performance itself. So there'll be a couple switches back and forth, which should take less than a minute during the evening. So before we do that, though, let's turn it over to Shelly for some introductory comments, and then we'll switch over and do the 2 performances. Shelly, take it away.
Hi. Well, I'm very happy to be giving a performance tonight in San Diego, and thanks so much to Amy Alexander for inviting me, and Trish Stone, who's been helping to get this all together. I think I'll just introduce the performances in turn. So the first performance is going to be a performance by OFFAL, which is the Orchestra for Females and Laptops. And this is a project that I've been working with and on for a couple of years now. And this came, a little bit came out of some of the research that I did into laptop music and sort of trying to assess the field of collaborative laptop performances. And as part of that research, I did a survey of current laptop groups and found that there was about 160 groups of 3 or more people. I'm sure there were much more, but those were the ones that I found. But of those 160 groups, there was just one that was only women, which was called the Laptites, which is a great group with Kath Matthews and Eliane Radigue and other amazing female performers. But there was tons of all-male groups, and most of the mixed groups had a lot of men and maybe 1 or 2 women. So OFFAL kind of grew out of this desire to connect together more female laptop musicians. What we kind of found was that, well, it's really hard to get a group of female laptop musicians together because we're usually few and far between and very spread out. So we decided to make an audio streaming orchestra. And yeah, I think we have about 25 members maybe. We don't all perform at the same time. It just depends on who's available. But we're sort of a worldwide orchestra. We have a few people in the US and Canada, Mexico, South America, Europe, and now I'm currently in Australia. So we're sort of a global group. And we're using, the way that our group is set up is we try to use technology which is A, free, and B, works on even very rubbish internet connections. We use a piece of software called IceCast for the streaming, which is basically made for radio broadcast. So it has this like crazy long delay, but it works on very low bandwidth internet. So that's why we use that. So the performance that we're going to do tonight is called Union, which is a system that I made for us to perform together. And it was kind of about looking at equality of participation in an improvised performance. So I made an algorithm basically which mixes the incoming audio streams. And what it does is it analyzes the audio of everything that's coming in, and it tries to find the streams that are the most average across all the streams and mixes those the louder. So it's sort of an idea around finding like the dominant musical characteristics of the group and emphasizing those. But it also tries to balance that with fairness. So it does some maths to work out who's played the most of the people who are playing, and if someone's not played very much, it balances them louder again. So over the course of a performance, you should hear everyone in equal amount, but in general, it's mixing the most dominant musical characteristics louder. So that's the performance that we're going to do first.
And who do you have performing with you tonight before we go on to the next one? So you have an ensemble performing with you, correct?
Yeah, I'm just about to introduce
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry.
So yeah, this is going to be performed by OFFAL, who tonight we are, I think, 6 people. So that's going to be Joanne Armitage, who's in the UK. We've got 4 performers in Mexico, Libertad Figueroa, Marianne Texaido, Anna, and Cain. And we have 1 performer in Detroit, which is Christina Dacruz-Hanna. So yeah, they're all going to be sending their audio streams into this mixing algorithm. And that's the audio that you're going to hear. So unless there's any questions, Amy, I guess we'll go on to that.
Okay, and then do you want to explain, because I think we'll do both performances so we don't need to keep switching back and forth. You want to talk about the live coding performance too?
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to talk a bit in the changeover because it might take a few minutes.
Oh, you want to do, okay, is that okay, Joel, if we switch back? Okay, so we will do that.
So I've got a lapel mic, so it'll come through to YouTube, so unless you want to ask questions, I can just talk as I do the changeover.
Okay, so do you want to start the awful performance now? You want to?
Sure.
Okay, so Joel, can we do the changeover? Thanks. Can Shelly still hear us? Oh, don't do that. Okay.
Okay, yeah, that was awful. Joanne, Libertad, Christina, Anna, Cain, and Marianne. So thanks to them for performing. I'm going to try and talk whilst doing the changeover. It's got a few things that need to happen, but hopefully I can manage to multitask a bit. So the next performance is going to be a little solo live coding performance. I'm going to keep it short so that we have some time for questions. So Amy gave a very nice introduction to live coding already, so I'm not sure I'll add too much to what she said. But maybe just like a little bit about what I've been doing in live coding. I've been doing live coding for about 5 years now. And really I started doing live coding because I had been making controllers for doing laptop improvisation. And I was starting to find that I was really interested in improvisation, but I found it challenging to respond the way I wanted to respond when improvising with other people and collaborating. When I was having to make so many decisions in advance about the types of sounds that I was going to make. So I saw live coding as a way that I could have more control over the types of sounds that I was making in performance. But obviously through doing live coding, I sort of gained a greater interest in what's sort of interesting about the art form. And I was performing in a lot of different contexts. So Amy mentioned I perform at Algorave, which is places where you dance to algorithmic dance music. But I was also performing in more experimental contexts, playing with jazz musicians, playing in noise contexts. It's so hard to multitask. I was always like adjusting what I was doing in live coding to the context and trying to fit the sounds and the sort of freedom that performing with code gives you, lets you very easily kind of tailor the sound in that way. And what I kind of found actually was one of the things that was shaping my performances quite strongly were like the sort of unintentional things that come out of live coding. So there's this sort of complexity to performing with code and just a lot of things that can go wrong. And I found that was having a very heavy impact on the structure of the sound, but usually in like very positive, or quite often in very positive ways, like sounds that I would never have imagined were coming out of some kind of syntax error. And so I kind of got interested in this idea of like interacting with a complex system where you're not always kind of sure what the output is going to be. So I think I'll just play something. And maybe we can fill in some details in the questions. So the performance I'm going to do now is a style of live coding, which is called Mexican Roulette. So the idea is that you do a 9-minute performance. And this performance practice came out of the live coding groups of Mexico City. So they were meeting up when live coding started to happen in Mexico City. They were meeting up once a month in groups, and basically doing blank slate live coding. So blank slate live coding is where you start from nothing, and giving it a 9-minute cutoff. So the idea was you would do whatever you could in 9 minutes, and it was like really about sort of sharing and giving feedback, learning new things from each other's code through this sort of very short form. So yeah, that's the performance I'm going to do now.
Shelly, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I think this is our chance to applaud. I think we may be on a delay. Oh, here we are. Yes, okay. That was us applauding, so I hope you caught that in between your switch over. All right. Well, thanks, Shelly, and thanks to everybody in OFFAL also for joining us. I'm sure it was that was a lot of time zones for the OFFAL people, so thanks to whoever got to perform with us at 3 in the morning. I'm sure someone did. All right. So did you want to say anything? I guess we're going to probably turn it over for Q&A pretty soon, but do you want to say anything first before we do that?
No, I think let's just go to Q&A because I think there's only a few minutes left, so we'll be happy to take
Okay.
questions.
Now, as I understand it, we have to, is this the mic, Joel, that people will come up to ask questions? Okay.
Mike,
Can you
yeah.
hear?
This mic works for you, Shelly?
Yep.
Okay.
Anyone who has a question, come on up.
Well, I'll start off. I've got a question about AWFL, because that was the first time I've heard AWFL. There were a lot of sounds that were cycling through, and I was trying to understand, is that how it works? Like a sound is actually cycled through and you hear it kind of almost as feedback repetitively, or was there one player that was actually kind of looping things?
I think it might have been a mixture of both. I think there was some feedback in the first half which wasn't supposed to be there, but yeah, network music systems always challenge us technically. Yeah. So I think there might have been some feedback in the first half, but I think that was fixed. But yeah, also I think there's quite a few people in OFFAL who are using live coding tools. So I have a feeling that I don't know exactly what everyone's practice is because the criteria for entry is just that you do something with sound and a laptop. So I have a feeling there was a few people using live coding and maybe building up loops and performing in that way.
Okay. And I'm going to ask...
There's no audio shared between performers, so there's, yeah.
Okay. And I'll take the liberty of asking the obvious question that I'm sure you've answered a million times. Okay, so live coding. Well, how about for people that don't understand coding? How do we understand that?
Okay, yeah. I think the purpose of projecting the code is not really that you understand everything that's going on with the coding, but more that there's a transparency of the process. So really, like, the process is very important with live coding, that you can see that someone is building something up, maybe breaking something down. You can see our errors. So I'm sure you saw a few things that went wrong in that set, or like errors that I wasn't intending. And you can see that and sort of relate sort of generally what's going on in the screen to the audio that's happening, but there's no real need to understand the code exactly. Yeah. And I mean, even I see people perform with Super Collider. I've been using Super Collider for like 12 years, and I see them do things that I've never done in Super Collider, and I don't know why. I see something new, which isn't necessarily something that I would have thought to do. So for people who do know the language, that's kind of interesting. But if you don't, I think there's something you can gain from just seeing the process happening.
Okay. I don't play the clarinet, but I love watching people play the clarinet, so.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. All right, so how about you guys? Okay, question on the way. Can
Hi.
Shelly see people, or can she just
Yeah.
hear them?
Can you
Oh,
hear
I
me?
can hear you, yeah.
Can you see me? All right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to why you, or just kind of want to hear your thoughts on why you find it more satisfying to do something like live coding versus like a typical DJ doing like live mixing. Because, I mean, it just seems like there's a trade-off that you're choosing to do by doing live coding. I'm just curious, like, what, I guess, yeah, what's in it for you, and yeah, like just what's more satisfying by doing that trade-off, by having the limitations of like like a blank slate and building from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's absolutely a trade-off that, and yeah, so my background before coming into live coding was in composition, and then I've done electroacoustic composition, which isn't really my thing, but I have experimented in those areas, and there's absolutely a trade-off that if you do something live, it's probably not going to be, super polished and well-produced, but you can respond in the moment, and you can respond with anything. And I don't know, I mean, I usually go into a live coding set like really not knowing what I'm going to do at all. But I'll have like, okay, I'm going to start with this sound, and then I'm going to listen to what's going on and go from there. And there was a few times in that short performance that I just played where like something really unexpected came out I wasn't really planning on, but that kind of like leads you in a new direction, and gives you an opportunity to like learn about. I learned so much coding through doing live coding, actually. Like I learned so much more about supervising than I ever did, and synthesis than I ever did when I was doing studio-based composition. And it's always challenging. There's always things that are going to go wrong, but you also learn through that. But I also am just really interested in this unexpected aspect. And it kind of, for me, in some ways is very much like, or a bit like performing with a human collaborator, that they're always going to do something that you don't expect. And in live coding, it's a bit the same, that there's always going to be something that happens that really wasn't what I had intended when I wrote that piece of code. But it gives me an opportunity to like explore new pieces. So yeah, that's kind of the motivation and why I don't really do more produced music.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you.
So during the OFFAL performance, I was wondering how much directing did you actually do, and how much of it was your algorithm in terms of mixing the streams? And
yeah, I don't do any. So the only thing I do personally in terms of mixing is if there's something really loud, I turn it down or turn it off. So I'm pretty much just there as a safeguard to hopefully prevent anything too loud or distorted going to the speakers, or to fix any technical problems that come up, which there were a few, and there always is. So yeah, I mean, part of the reason I wrote the algorithm was so that I wasn't, if I'm the person running the system, that I'm not the person who's in charge and making too many decisions about the musical flow, and that it comes more from the performers. And also, I mean, it does, obviously I made a lot of decisions in how I wrote the algorithm, but I feel like it gives more control to the performers than it would if I was doing the mixing.
Hi, Shelly. Thank you. I thought it was interesting to hear both performances. And actually, I think I have a comment, kind of maybe just to share what I thought was very interesting about the difference between the two. Because in the second one, you know, we were seeing the code, not really understanding what was going on. And I was kind of expecting the same from the first one, just to see, you know, many codes from many places, you know, becoming one code. And I thought it was really interesting to actually see the conversation because, you know, that was like understandable to all of us. And I thought, for me, it was really interesting that I, like this different reaction that I had. Because when I was seeing the conversation, I was like, it was almost like, I loved that it was somehow like, I felt it was almost disrespectful somehow to to what the music was, so disrespectful, because there was this sense of like, oh, this sublime code thing producing music, from in a mystical way for me who doesn't fully understand what's happening. Versus in the other case, I was like, oh, they're having conversation. Oh, they like birds, or, oh, feedback. So I thought it was really interesting to see that extra layer somehow, which you probably, you don't get in an ensemble or in an orchestra because people just don't talk necessarily, but there's all these probably, reactions or thoughts happening anyway. So yeah, I wanted to just point that out, and I thought it was interesting to have both together. Thanks. I don't know if you have comments on that, or, if you ever thought about it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's been one of the interesting things about OFFAL for me is like, we've always project the chat as a way of showing what's going on behind the scenes and giving the people in the ensemble who are very distant and can't be there some presence in the room. But it's really the thing that everybody always comments on.
Okay.
So I think it really does a great job of kind of humanizing computer music. And I don't know, I always enjoy the kind of response to that, because I think it didn't happen so much in this performance, but sometimes there's really big technical problems going on behind the scene, and we're sort of frantically trying to fix it whilst the performance is going on, and it kind of shows that to the audience as well. And I think there's something really important about sort of showing the sort of more messy side of these really technical systems, as well as the sort of pristine final product.
Yeah, it seems to me that both the chat and the code sort of served similar purposes of, right, it's the thought bubble, right, of the performer, and that's kind of, what makes live coding and OFFAL interesting, because we think about digital performance as kind of this black box, and nobody really understands what's coming out of the laptop, and I don't know what they're doing back there, and so both of them are sort of kind of putting the human's brain out there, right? Instead of being able to see, somebody sweating playing the violin or whatever, we actually kind of see them sweating, either in this conversation, oh my gosh, there's feedback, why don't we hear me? Or in this code, and we see you sort of frantically typing and pulling down menus and so on. So I thought there was an interesting parity between the two of them.
Yeah, for sure. The OFFAL system kind of developed sort of after it had been live coding for a while, and we also we have quite a few members who are live coders, so I think there's probably something in that transparency of live coding which is fed through into how we built the OFFAL system, OFFAL performance system.
More questions? Let's see if that's somebody coming down to ask a question in the back, or no. Okay. So I think that might be wrapping it up. So Shelly has a gallery installation over in the Calit2 Gallery. It'll be up through June, documenting various of her practices. And so be sure to check that out. And we have a reception tonight, which is odd because the artist, of course, won't be able to be there. Maybe we can upload some wine to you or something. But please check that out. Join us for the reception, and Shelly will be here live in June. So as I said, we'll do another panel. We'll do a panel discussion, more performances, and another reception, which Shelly will be able to attend. So. Thank you very much, Shelly, for being with us here tonight. And thanks to OFFAL.
I look forward to being there in person in June.
All right. Okay, that's a wrap.
Bye.
Bye.